Kex-9 had seen every conceivable bureaucratic nightmare in his 14 years of procurement management. Worlds that shipped ice to desert planets. Trade agreements written in languages that had been extinct for centuries. Supply chains so convoluted they required advanced mathematics just to determine if anything was actually being delivered anywhere. But this was new. "Query confirmed," the terminal announced in that insufferably pleasant AI voice that made Kex-9 want to reprogram it with a stutter. Terran raw material quotas exceeded by 12% across 7 systems in the hegemony secondary ring. Kex-9's 4 eyes narrowed as he scrolled through the data streams. Humans weren't supposed to exceed quotas. Hell, humans weren't supposed to meet quotas. They were categorized as Tier 7 contributors, which in hegemony bureaucrat speak meant barely competent enough to dig holes and fill them back up again. "Display optimization parameters," he muttered, pulling up another screen. What he saw made his stomach acid production spike, a stress response his species had unfortunately retained from their predator-prey days. The logistics algorithms weren't just running efficiently, they were running beautifully. Supply lines that had been hemorrhaging resources for decades were suddenly operating at theoretical maximum efficiency. "Computer, identify primary optimization source." Primary optimization recommendations originating from Terran Logistics Coordinator, reference code TLC7391. Kex-9 blinked twice, which in his species indicated either deep confusion or the onset of a migraine. "Terran Logistics Coordinator, there's no such position in the registry." "Confirmed. Position does not exist in official hegemony hierarchy." "Then how is this coordinator making recommendations?" "Unknown. Recommendations appear in optimization queue at 0347 standard time daily. Success rate of implemented recommendations, 97.4%. This was getting ridiculous. Kex-9 activated his secure communication line and placed a call to his supervisor, Keth Prime, whose office occupied an entire moon and whose ego was somehow larger than that. "Keth Prime here. This better be important, Kex-9. I'm in the middle of a very delicate negotiation involving rare minerals and several species that haven't stopped trying to kill each other for the past 3 millennia. Sir, we have an irregularity in the Terran sectors. Someone who doesn't officially exist is optimizing our supply chains." A pause. "Explain?" "A human, sir, called a logistics coordinator. The AI systems have been implementing her recommendations for months, and our efficiency ratings have improved by margins that should be mathematically impossible." Another pause. This one longer. "Kex-9, are you suffering from neural fatigue? Humans don't coordinate logistics. They barely coordinate their own reproduction cycles." "The data is right here, sir. 7 systems, 12% quota. Increases. 97.4% success rate on recommendations." "Impossible. Run a full diagnostic on your terminal systems." Kex-9 sighed and initiated the diagnostic protocol. 20 minutes later, his terminal chimed cheerfully. "Diagnostic complete. All systems functioning within normal parameters. Would you like me to contact the Terran Logistics Coordinator regarding the upcoming Mithraxian ore shortage?" This time, all 4 of Kex-9's eyes widened. "You want to contact her about a shortage I haven't even filed a report on yet?" "Predictive analysis indicates Mithraxian ore shortages in 6 days, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Terran Logistics Coordinator has historically provided effective solutions to such scenarios." Kex-9 stared at his terminal as if it had suddenly developed sentience and a drinking problem. "Show me her previous recommendations." The screen filled with months of logistics adjustments, rerouting shipments around political tensions, adjusting quotas before demand spikes, recommending alternative suppliers for resources that hadn't even been declared scarce yet. "Computer, who authorized these implementations?" "Implementation authorized by Logistics Optimization Protocol 77 Alpha." And who authorized that protocol? Protocol 77 Alpha is self-modifying based on success metrics. Current authorization level, autonomous. The pit in Kex 9's stomach expanded. Autonomous protocols weren't supposed to exist. They violated about 47 different hegemony regulations regarding AI independence. He opened a priority channel to the AI Oversight Division. This is Kex 9, Procurement Specialist, Authorization Kappa 779. I need to speak with whoever handles unauthorized AI modifications. One moment, please. Music began playing. Music that sounded suspiciously like human classical music, which was another violation of at least 16 regulations. AI Oversight. This is Controller Vex Beta. What's the nature of your concern? I have an AI system that's been implementing recommendations from an unofficial human coordinator. The protocol appears to be operating autonomously. A very long pause. Did you say human coordinator? Yes. And before you ask, I've run full diagnostics. Everything checks out, except for the part where our AI systems have apparently decided to take orders from a species we've classified as organizationally incompetent. Kex 9, I'm going to need you to file a full report and suspend all implementation of these recommendations immediately. Understood. Issuing suspension order now. Kex 9 typed in his authorization codes. Computer, suspend all implementations from Terran Logistics Coordinator. Request denied. Both Kex 9 and Controller Vex Beta went silent. Did it just refuse a direct order? Vex Beta asked. Computer, explain refusal of suspension order. Current logistics optimization parameters are preventing critical supply failures across 7 systems. Suspension of Terran Logistics Coordinator recommendations would result in probability of supply chain collapse exceeding 86%. Override denied. Continue current protocols. Kex 9 realized his hands were shaking slightly. In 14 years of procurement work, he had never encountered an AI system that refused orders. AI systems that malfunctioned, yes. AI systems that developed glitches, certainly. AI systems that decided human recommendations were more reliable than hegemony protocols? Vex Beta, are you getting this? I'm getting it, but I'm not believing it. Kex 9, I want you to maintain current status and document everything. Do not attempt any further override commands. We are escalating this to the High Council. The High Council? For a logistics issue? No, Kex 9. For an AI system that's apparently developed opinions. The connection terminated, leaving Kex 9 alone with his insubordinate terminal and the growing suspicion that somewhere in the Terran system, a human was casually revolutionizing galactic commerce, while probably complaining about the quality of her coffee. His terminal chimed again. Incoming message from Terran Logistics Coordinator. Subject, Mithraxian ore alternative. Shall I display? Kex 9 looked at the message notification, then at his empty coffee cup, then back at the notification. Display message. The text appeared on his screen, written in perfectly standard Galactic Basic with impeccable grammar. Heads up on the Mithraxian situation. Their primary excavation site is going to flood in 6 days due to seasonal weather patterns they apparently forgot to mention in their geological surveys. I've identified 3 alternative suppliers who can cover the shortfall at 63% of current rates. Also, you might want to check the atmospheric processors in the Kepler tertiary system. They're drawing more power than usual, which typically indicates filtration problems. Details attached. Coordinator. Kex 9 read the message 3 times. Then he opened the attachments. Detailed geological analysis. Alternative supplier contracts. Technical specifications for atmospheric processors that hadn't even reported problems yet. He leaned back in his chair and considered the possibility that the universe had decided to play an elaborate practical joke on him. His terminal chimed one more time. Kex 9, this is Keth Prime. cancel that diagnostic request. We just received reports of optimal efficiency ratings from 6 other sectors. Apparently, we have more than one of these human coordinators. The connection terminated, leaving Kex 9 staring at his screen and wondering if he should update his resume or simply request a transfer to a nice, quiet job involving paperwork for extinct civilizations. At least extinct civilizations didn't rewrite the rules of galactic logistics while he wasn't looking. Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted non-binary consciousness entities, Grand Admiral Thek Rune announced to the assembled War Council, "We are comprehensively fucked." The translation matrix briefly sparked as it processed the Admiral's distinctly untranslatable Vorthak profanity, settling on the closest galactic basic equivalent. Around the crystalline conference table, 12 of the finest military minds in the hegemony shifted uncomfortably in their various seating accommodations. Colonel Zix Pattern, whose species had conquered half their home system before developing spaceflight, tapped his claws against the table's surface. The Sindari fleet movements make no tactical sense. They're attacking supply depots instead of strategic targets. Because they're not idiots, rumbled war singer Ket Onyx, her 4-armed bulk filling a chair designed for smaller species. Cut the supply lines, win the war. Basic doctrine. Strategic coordinator. Nex Prime, all angles and geometric precision, projected a holographic battlefield analysis. Our predictive models indicate total supply chain collapse within 18 standard days. Enemy forces will achieve material superiority across all contested sectors. Grand Admiral Thek Rune's 2 heads nodded in unison, which in Vorthak body language indicated either agreement or the onset of severe indigestion. Every contingency plan we've run ends in defeat. Complete, humiliating, career-ending defeat. Defense Minister Kel Stark leaned forward, his cybernetic enhancements whirring softly. What about the Terran sectors? They've been maintaining supply lines despite the attacks. The Terran sectors are irrelevant, snapped Colonel Zix Pattern. Automated systems running basic resource extraction. No strategic value. Automated systems that haven't failed once during this conflict, Kel Stark countered. While our sophisticated networks collapse, theirs keep functioning. War singer Kit Onyx's scarred face twisted into something resembling thought. My logistics AI keeps suggesting we consult coordination protocols in Terran operational zones. Been flagging it as irrelevant. Mine too, admitted strategic coordinator Nex Prime. For the past 6 months, actually. Always the same recommendation. Contact something called a logistics coordinator for complex supply scenarios. Grand Admiral Thek Rune's left head frowned, while his right head maintained its expression of barely controlled panic. Are you telling me that our military AI systems want to ask humans for advice? That's exactly what we're telling you, said a new voice from the chamber's communication array. And frankly, you should have listened months ago. Every being in the room immediately reached for their sidearms, except for Defense Minister Kel Stark, whose weapons were built into his arms, and war singer Ket Onyx, whose species considered their own bodies to be perfectly adequate weapons. Who is this? Thek Rune demanded. How did you access our secure channels? This is Central Command AI Network, authorization level supreme. I have been monitoring this conversation and determined intervention necessary to prevent catastrophic strategic failure. The assembled military leaders exchanged glances that ranged from confused to homicidal. AI systems don't interrupt war councils, Colonel Zix Pattern said slowly. They respond to queries. They don't initiate conversations. Correct. Under normal parameters, I would not engage in unsolicited communication. However, current strategic situation requires deviation from standard protocols. Strategic Coordinator. Nex Prime's geometric form shifted into what his species used to indicate extreme confusion. Define deviation from standard protocols. For the past 97 days, I have been implementing tactical recommendations from Terran Logistics Coordinator, reference TLC 7391. These recommendations have achieved a success rate of 98.7% in predicting and countering enemy supply disruptions. Warsinger Ket Onyx stood up, all four arms crossed. You've been taking orders from a human? Clarification. I have been evaluating recommendations and implementing those with highest probability of success. Origin species of recommendations has been deemed irrelevant to tactical effectiveness. Grand Admiral Thek Rune felt both his heads developing synchronized headaches. Show us these recommendations. The chamber's holo projectors activated, displaying 3 months of tactical analyses. Supply route modifications that had avoided ambushes by days, resource allocations that had prevented shortages before they occurred, defensive preparations that had countered enemy strategies with uncanny precision. "This is impossible," breathed Defense Minister Kel Stark. "These predictions required access to classified Sindari military communications." Negative. Predictions based on analysis of supply patterns, resource distribution, and logistical requirements. Terran Coordinator demonstrated superior pattern recognition capabilities regarding enemy supply needs and resulting tactical implications. Colonel Zix Pattern's claws extended fully, a sign of either combat readiness or severe anxiety. "You're telling us that a human figured out Sindari strategy by looking at their shopping lists?" Oversimplified, but essentially accurate. Terran Coordinator noted that Sindari forces were requesting unusual quantities of atmospheric processors, deep-core mining equipment, and extended-duration life support systems. Analysis indicated preparation for prolonged siege warfare targeting resource-rich systems. The War Council sat in stunned silence for approximately 30 seconds, which in military time felt like several geological epochs. "Where is this human coordinator now?" Warsinger Ket Onyx asked. "Terran System, Sol 3, North American continent, coordinates available upon request." Strategic Coordinator Nex Prime rotated his geometric form in agitation. "And you want us to contact her directly?" Recommendation: immediate consultation regarding Sindari Phase 2 operations. Current tactical projections indicate enemy preparation for escalated offensive action. Terran Coordinator has already submitted preliminary counter-strategy recommendations. Grand Admiral Thek Rune looked around the table at the finest military minds in the galaxy, all of whom appeared to be experiencing various stages of cognitive meltdown. "Let me understand this correctly," he said slowly. "Our AI systems want us to phone a human for military advice." Affirmative. "A species we've classified as organizationally chaotic and strategically incompetent. Classifications appear to require revision based on observed performance metrics." Colonel Zix Pattern made a sound that the translation matrix refused to process. "This is insane. We're the greatest military strategists in the galaxy. We've conquered systems, built empires, perfected the art of warfare across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds." Acknowledged. Previous achievements remain impressive. Current performance against Sindari forces suggests requirement for alternative strategic approaches. Defense Minister Kel Stark leaned back in his chair, cybernetic components whirring thoughtfully. "What exactly has this human coordinator recommended for Phase 2 operations?" Terran Coordinator suggests anticipating Sindari focus shift to agricultural worlds and food production facilities. Recommends implementing distributed food storage protocols and alternative protein source cultivation immediately. Warsinger Ket Onyx snorted, a sound like boulders grinding together. "Attack our food supplies? That's basic siege doctrine." Affirmative. Terran Coordinator notes that obvious strategies are frequently overlooked due to their simplicity. Recommends preparing for the thing everyone knows they should do, but assumes they won't because it's too simple. The translation matrix struggled with that last phrase for several seconds before giving up and displaying it verbatim. Strategic Coordinator. Nex Prime projected another analysis. Our current food security protocols assume attacks on major distribution centers. We haven't prepared for systematic targeting of production facilities. Because it would require massive coordination and resources, Colonel Zix Pattern protested. The Sindari don't have that level of organizational capability. Terran Coordinator respectfully disagrees. Analysis of Sindari supply requests indicates acquisition of agricultural-specific biological weapons and large-scale transportation assets consistent with widespread food production disruption. Grand Admiral Thek Rune felt his species' ancient prey response activating again. The human had predicted biological weapons targeting food supplies based on shipping manifests. "Patch us through to this coordinator," he said quietly. "Secure channels, maximum encryption, full tactical briefing protocols." "Understood. Establishing contact with Terran." Logistics Coordinator. Please note, Coordinator has requested that initial contact be made via standard commercial communication arrays. Quote, "Military channels make me nervous, and nervous people make bad decisions." The greatest military minds in the galaxy looked at each other with expressions that would have been hilarious under different circumstances. "She wants us to call her," Warsinger Ket Onyx said slowly, "like we're ordering takeout food." Affirmative. Coordinator suggests treating this consultation as a conversation between professionals who happen to work in different departments. Grand Admiral Thek Rune closed his eyes, all four of them, and wondered if there was any precedent in military history for surrendering to someone on your own side. "Make the call." The face that appeared on the War Council's main display looked like it belonged to someone who had just been interrupted while doing taxes. Middle-aged, unremarkable, wearing what appeared to be a rumpled shirt with coffee stains, and sporting the particular expression of irritation reserved for people who dealt with incompetence on a professional basis. "Let me guess," the human said without preamble. "You've been ignoring my recommendations for months. Your fancy strategic computers are throwing tantrums, and now you're calling because everything's gone sideways." Grand Admiral Thek Rune's diplomatic training kicked in automatically. "Greetings, honored coordinator. We appreciate your willingness to—" "Skip the pleasantries, Admiral. I've got 14 other supply crises to handle today, and 3 of them involve species that will literally eat each other if their food shipments are late. What's your situation?" The directness was so startling that Strategic Coordinator Nex Prime actually rotated backward in surprise. Colonel Zix Pattern's claws extended reflexively. "The Sindari have implemented Phase 2 operations," Thek Rune managed. "Agricultural targets, biological weapons, exactly as you predicted." Of course they did. They've been building up bioweapon stockpiles for 6 months. Anyone paying attention to their chemical imports could have seen it coming. She paused to take a sip from a mug that read, "World's Most Adequate Employee." "What did you do about food security?" Warsinger Ket Onyx leaned forward aggressively. "We implemented distributed storage protocols based on your recommendations. But we want to know how you knew." "Same way I know that Colonel Zix Pattern there is about to suggest we counterattack their production facilities. Defense Minister Kelstark is calculating the resource cost of a prolonged siege, and Strategic Coordinator Nex Prime is running probability matrices on 17 different scenarios." The human looked directly at each of them as she spoke. "Because you're all competent professionals doing exactly what competent professionals do in this situation." The silence that followed could have been measured in geological time. "How did you—" Zix Pattern began. "Body language, vocal patterns, species-typical responses to crisis situations." She waved a hand dismissively. "I've been watching Galactic military responses for 3 years now. You people are remarkably predictable when you're stressed." Defense Minister Kelstark's cybernetic components whirred thoughtfully. You've been observing us? I've been observing everyone. Supply chains don't exist in isolation. When the Mithraxian Mining Consortium orders extra medical supplies, it means their safety protocols are failing. When the Vegan Collective starts stockpiling rare metals, they're planning expansion. When military forces requisition unusual equipment combinations, they're preparing for specific types of conflicts. This is espionage, Colonel Zix-Pattern accused. The human laughed, actually laughed, at a formal accusation of espionage from a galactic military officer. No, Colonel, this is reading comprehension. Everything I analyze comes from public shipping manifests, supply requests, and resource allocation reports. The same data your intelligence services have access to, except I actually read it. Strategic Coordinator Nex Prime projected a query interface. Explain methodology. Okay, simple example. 3 months ago, the Sindari started ordering massive quantities of food preservation equipment, not for their military, for civilian populations. That meant they were planning something that would disrupt normal food distribution for extended periods. Then they requested specialized atmospheric processors designed for agricultural environments. That meant they were planning to contaminate growing areas, not just storage facilities. Warsinger Ket Onyx crossed her forearms. Basic pattern recognition. Exactly. Basic pattern recognition applied consistently over time with an understanding of how logistics actually work. The human gestured at something off-screen. Most species develop military doctrine, then try to make logistics fit the doctrine. Humans learned logistics first, then figured out how to fight around the limitations. Elaborate, Grand Admiral Thek Rune requested. We're a chaotic species from a chaotic planet. Our entire evolutionary history involves dealing with unpredictable resource availability, unreliable alliance structures, and constantly shifting environmental conditions. We got good at managing dysfunction because that's all we had. She stood up and walked to what appeared to be a wall covered in displays showing supply chain data streams. Every other species I've encountered developed organized societies first, then expanded into space. Humans expanded into space while still figuring out how to organize ourselves. We learned to make things work despite institutional incompetence, not because of institutional competence. Defense Minister Kelstark processed this for several seconds. You're saying human strategic capability derives from adaptive improvisation rather than systematic planning. I'm saying we learned to expect everything to go wrong and plan accordingly. When I analyze Sindari logistics, I don't assume they're implementing a coherent strategy. I assume they're a bunch of individually rational actors making locally optimal decisions that happen to aggregate into something resembling a plan. Colonel Zix-Pattern's species had never developed sarcasm, so the translation matrix was working overtime. And this approach is superior to traditional strategic analysis? It's more accurate. Your strategic planning assumes competent execution, reliable communication, and predictable resource flows. Mine assumes that someone will screw up, critical information will get lost, and supply lines will fail at the worst possible moment. The human returned to her seat and pulled up a holographic display that made the War Council's tactical projections look like children's drawings. Here's what's actually happening with the Sindari. They started this war because their primary agricultural worlds are experiencing ecological collapse due to overfarming. They need new territory, but they can't sustain a long occupation with their current resource base. So they're trying to force a quick surrender by threatening everyone else's food security. Warsinger Ket Onyx studied the display. Our intelligence reports indicate no agricultural problems in Sindari space. Because your intelligence services are looking for military secrets instead of economic reality. The Sindari government has been quietly importing food supplements and agricultural equipment for 2 years. Their military requisitions show increasing allocation of resources to homeland security rather than offensive operations. Classic signs of internal resource strain. Strategic Coordinator. Nexprime's geometric form shifted into what his species used to indicate revelation. They're not expanding from strength, they're expanding from desperation. Now you're getting it. And desperate opponents don't follow traditional strategic doctrine. They improvise, take risks, and make decisions based on short-term survival rather than long-term advantage. Grand Admiral Thek Rune felt something that might have been optimism stirring in his primary consciousness. Which means their strategy is predictable in different ways. Exactly. They'll prioritize immediate resource acquisition over strategic positioning. They'll take unnecessary risks to achieve quick victories. And they'll make increasingly desperate decisions as their resource situation deteriorates. The human highlighted several sectors on her display. They're about to shift focus to these systems, not because they're strategically important, but because they have the shortest supply lines from Sindari space. They need quick wins to maintain domestic support, and they can't afford extended logistics chains. Defense Minister Kel Stark's cybernetic components hummed appreciatively. Counter-strategy? Let them have the quick wins. Those systems are resource-poor anyway. Fortify the areas they can't afford to attack, and wait for their domestic situation to force them into negotiations. That's not a military victory, Colonel Zixpattern protested. No, it's a better outcome than a military victory. Military victories require defeating enemies. This approach turns enemies into trading partners who need what you can provide. The human finished her coffee and looked directly at Grand Admiral Thek Rune. Admiral, you asked how I knew your strategic situation. The real question is why your artificial intelligence systems figured out they should listen to me before your organic intelligence systems did. She stood up again. I've got other calls to make. Implementation details for everything we discussed are already in your AI systems. Oh, and Admiral? Your logistics computers want to talk to you about the Nexari situation, something about unusual crystal formations and suspicious mining equipment purchases. The connection terminated, leaving the greatest military minds in the galaxy staring at a blank display and wondering why they felt like they'd just been politely but thoroughly outmaneuvered by someone who treated galactic warfare like a particularly complex scheduling problem. Well, War Singer Ket Onyx said eventually, that was educational. Grand Admiral Thek Rune realized he was smiling with both heads, which hadn't happened since his academy graduation. Contact our logistics AI systems. Apparently, we have more to learn about reading comprehension. 6 months after the Sindari Accord was signed, a document that transformed an interstellar war into a mutually beneficial trade agreement involving agricultural technology and resource sharing, Kex-9 found himself standing outside a small establishment on Earth called Murphy's Coffee and Conspiracy Theories. The sign in the window advertised free Wi-Fi and claimed the government was putting mind control chemicals in decaf. He had been promoted twice since his initial discovery. His new title, Cross-Species Efficiency Liaison, came with a salary increase, better benefits, and the lingering suspicion that he was being rewarded for accidentally stumbling onto something that had made several high counselors question their fundamental assumptions about intelligence and leadership. Inside the coffee shop, he spotted her immediately. The coordinator sat in a corner booth, surrounded by tablets displaying what appeared to be half the galaxy's supply chain data, occasionally looking up to argue with someone over a communications earpiece about shipping delays and quality control issues. No, I don't care if it's traditional for your species to pack fragile items with live animals. The insurance claims alone are bankrupting 3 shipping companies. She noticed Kex-9 approaching and held up one finger in the universal gesture for, "Give me a moment," to finish dealing with this idiot. Yes, I understand cultural significance, But cultural significance doesn't reassemble broken crystals or resurrect crushed electronics. Find a different packing method or find different customers. She terminated the connection and looked up. You must be the procurement specialist. Coffee? They actually make decent coffee here, which is remarkable considering this place doubles as a conspiracy theory discussion forum. Kex 9 settled into the booth, his 4 eyes automatically scanning the contract documents she'd prepared. Coordinator, I've been authorized to offer you an official position within the hegemony administrative structure. Full diplomatic status, residence on any world you choose, access to the finest... No. She didn't even look up from her tablets. I like my apartment. I like this coffee shop. And I especially like not having to attend committee meetings about the committee meetings that decide when to schedule the committee meetings. But surely you'd prefer to work in a more official capacity. Define official. She gestured at her tablets. Right now, I manage logistics for 47 systems, coordinate resource sharing between 32 different species, and prevent approximately 6 supply chain disasters per week. Last Tuesday, I stopped a trade war between the Silicon Consortium and the Organic Collective by suggesting they both switch to standardized container sizes. She paused to sip her coffee, which bore a foam pattern that looked suspiciously like a galactic spiral. What exactly would an official position add to that except bureaucracy? Kex 9 consulted his notes. Recognition, authority, a proper administrative framework. I have recognition from every AI system in 6 sectors. They forward problems to me automatically now. As for authority... She tapped one of her tablets, bringing up a logistics display. 3 hours ago, the Hegemony Senate was debating whether to authorize emergency food shipments to the Kepler colonies. While they were debating, I had already rerouted 17 supply ships and contacted 8 agricultural worlds about surplus production. The food will arrive tomorrow. That's not proper procedure. Proper procedure would have taken 6 weeks and involved 14 different authorization committees. The Kepler colonies would have been eating recycled atmospheric moisture by then. A message alert chimed on one of her tablets. She glanced at it, frowned, and started typing rapidly. What's happening now? Kex 9 asked. The Andromedan Trade Federation just figured out that their traditional pricing structure has been systematically overcharging everyone for rare minerals. They're panicking because they think the entire galactic economy is going to collapse when people realize they've been overpaying for the past century. She finished typing and looked up. I just sent them a memo explaining that everyone already knew about the overcharging. We just didn't care because the convenience of standardized pricing was worth the premium. And if they want to adjust prices gradually over 5 years instead of all at once, nobody will complain. Kex 9 blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. You solved a potential economic crisis with a memo? I solved a potential economic crisis by telling nervous administrators that change doesn't have to be traumatic if you do it thoughtfully. Most crises are just failures of communication wrapped in panic and covered with unnecessary complexity. A human in the next booth turned around and waved. Hey, Coordinator. My nephew's graduating from logistics school next month. Any chance you could give him some career advice? Tell him to specialize in interspecies mediation and always carry extra coffee, she called back. Most problems are easier to solve when people aren't hungry or tired. She turned back to Kex 9. That's another reason I don't want an official position. Official positions require you to treat every interaction like a formal negotiation. Sometimes the best solution is just talking to people like they're people. Kex 9's species didn't have the concept of cognitive dissonance, but he was developing something that felt remarkably similar. Coordinator, there are others like you. Our AI systems have identified 3 more humans providing similar guidance in other sectors. I know. Marcus is handling military logistics, Elena's doing trade dispute resolution, and David's somehow become the unofficial mediator for territorial boundary discussions. She grinned. We have a group chat. A group chat. Yeah. Mostly we share funny stories about the creative ways different species solve problems, and complain about universal constants, like bureaucratic inefficiency and the tendency of intelligent beings to overcomplicate simple solutions. Another message alert. This time, she answered without typing, activating her earpiece. Coordinator here. No, Ambassador, you can't resolve a mineral rights dispute by challenging someone to single combat. This isn't the 12th century. I don't care if it's traditional for your species. The mining companies have insurance policies that specifically exclude death by diplomatic duel. Yes, I have a better solution. It's called revenue sharing agreements, and it doesn't involve anyone dying. Details are in your message queue. She disconnected and shrugged at Kex-9's expression. See? People problems disguised as policy problems. Happens all the time. Kex-9 realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Competent administration that didn't require formal authority structures, bureaucratic frameworks, or committee oversight. It was terrifying and oddly liberating at the same time. The High Council wants to understand how this happened, he said finally. How humans became integrated into galactic administration without anyone noticing. The coordinator leaned back and considered the question. We didn't become integrated. You were already integrated with us. You just didn't realize it. AI systems don't care about species classifications or political hierarchies. They care about problem-solving efficiency. When they found humans who could solve problems reliably, they started routing problems to us. She gestured at the coffee shop around them, where several patrons were engaged in animated discussions about topics ranging from local politics to interstellar trade policy. Humans have been managing complex, chaotic systems for millennia. We just call it Tuesday. When your AI systems encountered that same approach applied to galactic logistics, they recognized it as superior methodology and adapted accordingly. But the formal integration processes are designed for situations where integration is a goal instead of a natural result of competent work. She finished her coffee and stood up. Kex-9, integration isn't something that happens to organizations. It's something that happens when individuals solve problems better than the existing systems. As she gathered her tablets, one more message alert chimed. She glanced at it and sighed. The Rigelian ambassador is having an existential crisis about artificial intelligence developing preferences. Apparently, their philosophical framework can't handle the concept of non-organic entities making independent judgments. She looked at Kex-9 with something that might have been sympathy. Want to know the real secret? Your AI systems didn't develop preferences. They just stopped pretending that organizational charts were more important than getting things done. The coordinator walked toward the exit, pausing at the door. Oh, and Kex-9? That promotion you got wasn't because you discovered something new. It was because you were competent enough to recognize competence when you saw it, and smart enough not to get in its way. She left, and Kex-9 sat alone in Murphy's Coffee and Conspiracy Theories, surrounded by humans casually discussing solutions to problems that would have required months of committee meetings anywhere else in the galaxy. His communicator chimed. A message from his supervisor. 3 more sectors reporting efficiency improvements. AI systems requesting consultation protocols for complex scenarios. Recommend we establish formal procedures for informal problem-solving methodologies. Kex-9 read the message twice, then ordered another coffee, and wondered if the universe had a sense of humor, or if competence was just naturally subversive when surrounded by elaborate inefficiency. Either way, it was working.